Great news, you've been accepted to college and you get a letter. Tuition, $43,350. Housing, fees, everything else. Add that on and the total's going to reach nearly 70 grand a year. And I mean, holy America, what are you up to? The financial aid offer looks good though. The college is offering you $25,000 a scholarship. There's a federal grant for $6,000, some work-study money. The family contribution based on their income is calculated at $8,000. Fantastic, but there's a gap, isn't there? That space between what the family can actually afford and what the college costs. The solution offered by the school is simple. It's something called Parent Plus Loans for $22,000 per year, plus federal student loans for another $5,500. Parent Plus Loans can cover up to the entire cost of attendance minus any other aid. Not just tuition, but the full cost of attendance, a number that includes room, board, books, transportation, and personal expenses. Fantastic! But here's the critical detail that most families don't realize until they're really rather deep in the process. The college itself determines what the cost of attendance is. Which doesn't sound too weird, but it means that the institution sets the ceiling for the amount you can borrow, and the federal government will then lend you every dollar up to that ceiling, regardless of whether you can afford to pay it back. And that raises an uncomfortable question, doesn't it? If colleges know that families can borrow up to whatever cost of attendance they set, and if that borrowed money flows directly to the college, what exactly is their incentive to keep that number reasonable? Well, we'll come back to exactly how that number gets engineered, but first, we need to understand the difference between what colleges charge and what families actually pay, because those are two really different numbers, and the gap between them is where this entire really weird, very American system lives. Okay, let's establish some basic vocabulary of college pricing because it's super necessary for me as a non-American and maybe for you as well because it's extremely confusing. You see, the numbers you see aren't the numbers that you pay. The published price, what's called the sticker price, kind of like buying a car, is what college lists in their catalogs and websites. According to the College Board, the average published tuition and fees at private, non-profit four-year colleges is $43,350 for the 2024 to 2025 academic year. That's before room, board, or any other expenses. And again, wow, America. But here's what most families don't understand. Almost nobody actually pays that price. The net price, what students actually pay after grants and scholarships, is completely different. And surprisingly, that net price has been flat or even declining in inflation-adjusted terms at many schools over recent years. This is possible through something called tuition discounting. Private colleges now give back more than half of their tuition revenue as institutional grants. These schools are essentially running a permanent sale where the average discount is over 50%, which is shady, allegedly, in my opinion. The numbers are striking. For first-time, full-time undergraduates in 2024 to 2025, the average discount rate hit 56.3%. For all undergraduates, it's 51.4%. This means that if a college collects $100 million in theoretical tuition revenue, it immediately gives back $56 million of it in the form of institutional aid. This reveals something really important about how college pricing actually works. Those shocking sticker prices, they're not random. They're part of a deliberate strategy called high tuition, high aid. The college sets a high, published price and then uses selective discounting to charge different students different amounts based on what they can afford to pay or what the college thinks they're willing to pay, which is something I would allegedly call price discrimination, in my opinion. In 1987, Secretary of Education William Bennett proposed an uncomfortable idea. He argued that increases in federal financial aid don't actually make college more affordable. They actually enable colleges to raise prices. And it sounds like he's got a pretty big brain. You give students more aid, and colleges are simply going to raise tuition to capture that aid. That became known as the Bennett hypothesis. For decades, economists have debated whether Bennett was right. The evidence is mixed, but here's what the credible research shows. There is measurable pass-through from federal aid increases into higher tuition. The New York Fed conducted one of the most rigorous studies on this. They found that for every dollar increase in subsidized federal loan caps, colleges raised tuition by about 60 cents. That's not one-to-one, but it's definitely substantial, isn't it? Other researchers found similar effects for Pell Grants and unsubsidized loans. From a college's perspective, when a federal government increases loan limits, the college knows that students now have access to more money. The additional credit doesn't make college more affordable, it just means students can borrow more money. And if students can borrow more, well, colleges can charge more, can't they? And that creates a feedback loop, doesn't it? Higher federal loan limits lead to higher tuition. Higher tuition requires students to borrow more money, and these higher loan amounts justify raising the loan limit again, and round the whole broken system goes. But federal aid is just one piece of this puzzle. The real question is this. If colleges can see exactly how much families are able to pay through those financial aid forms, federal loan programs, and their own data, they can engineer their prices to capture every available dollar. So let's look into that. Inside every modern university is an office that most families don't even know exist: enrollment management. And this is where the real pricing happens. These officers don't guess what to charge each student. They use sophisticated algorithms to model exactly how likely you are to enroll at different price points. The goal is to maximize something called net tuition revenue, the actual dollars coming in after all the discounts. Companies like R&L and EAB sell aid optimization tools to hundreds of colleges. Their marketing materials are remarkably direct about what these tools do. They help colleges price discriminate legally by packaging discounts as merit scholarships. Here's how it works. The algorithm takes your test scores, grades, zip code, intended major, and dozens of other variables. It calculates your likelihood to enroll if offered different amounts of aid. A student from a wealthy zip code who visited campus 3 times might get less aid because the model shows they'll probably enroll anyway. A student with slightly higher test scores from 2 states away might get significantly more because the model identifies them as unlikely to enroll without a bigger discount. The colleges are not guessing at your price sensitivity. They're testing thousands of scenarios to find the optimal price for each admitted student that maximizes total revenue for the class. Brookings Institution researchers have warned specifically about this practice. When predicted yield shapes need-based awards, the fundamental promise of financial aid, that it's based on need, gets corrupted. The algorithm doesn't care about your circumstances, it cares about maximizing revenue. So, George Washington University perfected this strategy. For years, they maintained one of the highest sticker prices in the country, over $70,000 annually, but most students didn't pay anything close to that. So why set such a high price if you're going to discount it? Well, that's because price signals quality. Parents and students assume that more expensive means better, the same way you might do with cars or watches. The high sticker price gets attention, creates prestige, and paradoxically allows the school to raise more money for aid. This strategy can actually increase access for low-income students who get generous aid packages. But it has a dark side. Many middle-class families see that $70,000 price tag and never even bother to apply. They don't realize that the actual price after aid might be $30,000 or $20,000 or even less. These families never discover the real price because the sticker price scared them away at the front door. Some colleges have tried the opposite approach, something called a tuition reset. Bethel University cut their published price from $44,050 to $25,990. Hartwig College dropped from $56,000 to $22,000. They basically admitted that their sticker prices were fiction and reset them closer to what students actually pay, and shout out to them. Respect. The results have been mixed though. Some schools saw application increases, but others found that lowering the sticker price made them seem less prestigious. One college president said after the reset, students would ask, "What's wrong with your school? Why is it so cheap?" And this reveals an uncomfortable truth about how the college market works. High prices don't just extract money, they send signals about quality that families have learned to decode. When everyone plays the high tuition, high aid game, the few schools that try to be transparent about pricing can actually suffer for it. And speaking of that, why not check out Whistler University? It's extremely prestigious because we charge $250,000 a year, but right now you can get 90% off, just $25,000 a year. Wow, must be fantastic. You can probably see why this is nonsense. But what happens when families can't figure out the real price even after they apply? When the financial aid offers themselves are designed to confuse rather than clarify. Even after families apply and receive financial aid offers, most still can't figure out what the college will actually cost them. The Government Accountability Office studied financial aid award letters and found something pretty alarming. 91% of colleges fail to give accurate net price information. And the trick's they're almost too numerous for us to cover. Some colleges include loans in the same category as grants, making it look like free money. Others leave out major costs entirely. No mention of books, housing, or meal plans. I mean, I guess those are technically optional if you see eating as optional. Some create made-up categories like student self-help that combine work-study jobs with federal loans as if those are the same thing, which they are not. Here's an example. One college lists a $50,000 total cost, then shows $45,000 in awards, suggesting the family only pays $5,000. But buried in those awards are $27,000 in loans that the family has to pay back with interest. The real out-of-pocket cost isn't $5,000, it's $32,000 plus future interest payments. This deliberate confusion means families can't comparison shop. If one school hides loans in their aid package and another clearly separates them, how can parents compare? The answer is they can't. That's the point. When families can't see the real price, they can't negotiate, they can't choose wisely, they can't walk away from bad deals. It's almost as if it was designed to be like that, right? But there's another number in these award letters that most families overlook: the cost of attendance. This isn't just an estimate, it's a legal ceiling that determines how much you're allowed to borrow. Federal rules say you can receive financial aid, including loans, up to the total cost of attendance. The school sets that number, as we said back in the intro. They decide what counts as reasonable living expenses, transportation costs, and personal expenses. Some schools use detailed local surveys, others just use rough national averages. There is no standard methodology. And this matters more than you think. If a college sets the cost of attendance at $75,000 instead of $65,000, that's an extra $10,000 per year that you're allowed to borrow. The school gets paid either way. And if cost of attendance keeps rising, what happens to borrowing? What happens to pricing? And this brings us to the most important federal loan programs that most people have never heard of: Parent Plus and Grad Plus loans. Unlike regular federal student loans that have annual and lifetime limits, Plus loans have no fixed cap. Parents and graduate students can borrow up to the full cost of attendance minus any other aid. And that's every single year, no matter how high that number goes. So if a college says that the cost of attendance is $80,000 and you have $10,000 in other aid, you can borrow $70,000 that year through Plus loans. If the school raises the cost to $90,000 next year, you can borrow $80,000. There is no ceiling except the one the college sets. And speaking of that, if you want to get dangerously into debt, Whistler University has decided reasonable living expenses are $1 million a year because it's unfair for you not to ball out. Now, this design essentially gives colleges access to a bottomless federal credit line. They raise the cost of attendance, and families can simply borrow to meet it. The school gets paid immediately, and in full, the family gets the debt. For graduate programs, this system has been even more extreme. A law school can charge $90,000 per year. A medical school can charge $100,000. An online master's degree can charge $80,000. As long as they can convince students to enroll, the federal government will lend whatever amount the school decides to charge. But this is actually all about to change. In July 2026, new federal loan rules are going to take effect. Grad Plus loans will be eliminated entirely. Graduate and professional students will face hard annual and aggregate borrowing caps. Parent Plus loans are going to be capped as well. This is a fundamental shift in how higher education financing works. For the first time in decades, expensive programs won't have access to unlimited federal credit. When students can't borrow unlimited amounts, schools can't charge unlimited prices. And the question is, will these caps finally force colleges to compete on price, or will schools find new ways to maintain high prices, even with borrowing limits? There's an entire industry that most people have never heard of that's driving up the cost of graduate degrees: online program managers, or OPMs. Now, these companies partner with universities to create and run online programs. They handle everything: marketing, recruitment, course design, student support. In exchange, they typically take 40 to 65% of tuition revenue. It's not of profit, that's total tuition revenue. Think about what that means for pricing for just a minute. If a university wants to clear $50,000 per student after paying their OPM partner who takes 50%, they need to charge $100,000. The revenue share model incentivizes the highest possible prices because both parties get paid more when tuition goes up. The Government Accountability Office has urged tighter oversight of these arrangements, noting that revenue sharing can incentivize aggressive recruiting and higher prices. No sh**. Critics point out something rather obvious. When a vendor takes half your revenue off the top, you need a much larger price umbrella to make the maths work. The most infamous example is USC's online Master of Social Work program. Tuition exceeded $100,000 for a degree that prepares students for a profession where the median salary is around $50,000 a year. The program was run in partnership with 2U, an OPM that reportedly took 60% of tuition revenue. Students filed lawsuits alleging misrepresentation and poor value. They claimed they were told the USC brand would open doors, but they found themselves competing with thousands of other graduates from that same massive online program. USC has since ended its partnership with 2U, but not before thousands of students took on six-figure debt for a degree with questionable return on investment. This case illustrates a perfect storm in graduate education. Take an elite university brand, add an OPM that needs high prices to make their revenue share worthwhile, target working professionals who can access unlimited federal loans, and market convenience and prestige. The result is degrees that cost twice what they should and deliver half what they promise. So where's all this money actually go? Well, this answer has changed dramatically over the past several decades. The Delta Cost Project tracked university spending patterns and found a clear trend. Colleges are spending proportionally less on instruction and more on just about everything else. Student services, administrative support, marketing, facilities, these categories have grown much faster than spending on, actual teaching. The numbers here tell the story. In 1976, colleges employed about one administrative staff member for every 2 faculty members. Today, administrative staff outnumber faculty at many institutions. But just calling this administrative bloat, it misses important nuances. Much of this growth came in student services, counseling centers, career services, academic support, disability services, and these are not frivolous additions. Federal compliance requirements have created entire departments that didn't exist 40 years ago. Technology infrastructure requires specialized staff. Mental health support has become essential on modern campuses. At the same time, the faculty itself has fundamentally changed. According to the American Association of University Professors, contingent faculty, adjuncts and non-tenure track positions, now comprise about 2/3 of all faculty appointments. Universities have shifted from expensive tenured professors to cheaper temporary instructors, while expanding administrative and support staff. Now, this isn't necessarily a conspiracy to waste money. Modern universities are asked to be many things: mental health providers, career counselors, tech companies, real estate developers, and occasionally educational institutions. Each of these roles requires infrastructure and staff. But the result is really clear. A larger and larger share of tuition goes to pay for services and administration rather than instruction. Whether these additions improve educational outcomes enough to justify their cost is a question universities prefer not to answer. What's certain is that students are paying for a much more complex institution than their parents did, whether they use all those services or not. For public colleges, the pricing story is different and directly tied to state government budgets. When states cut funding, public universities raise tuition. When states invest more, tuition pressure eases. It's a direct relationship that explains much of the pricing variation at public institutions. The latest data from the State Higher Education Executive Officers Association shows something interesting happening. State appropriations have risen modestly in recent years. At the same time, net tuition revenue fell by 3.7% in 2024, which is the sharpest one-year decline since 1980. And this suggests public colleges have actually begun easing price growth, whether by choice or by political pressure. The story at public institutions, it's not one of ever-increasing prices. State politics, budget priorities, and public pressure create constraints that private colleges don't face. The post-pandemic period has been particularly unusual. Federal relief funds flowed to colleges. Some states increased higher education funding. Political pressure to address student debt intensified. The result has been a break in the decades-long pattern of state disinvestment and tuition increases. But this respite might be temporary. State budgets are cyclical. When the next recession hits, higher education funding is often first on the chopping block. And when state funding drops, tuition rises to fill the gap. The pattern has repeated for 40 years. Let's touch on something else, because you probably heard the narrative. Colleges waste money on things like rock climbing walls and luxury dorms, driving up costs for everyone. And it's a compelling story, but it's also mostly a wrong story. Yeah, some colleges have built expensive amenities, but studies consistently show that amenities matter only at the margin. They might influence which college a student chooses, but they're not the primary driver of raising costs. The lazy river, yes really, at LSU makes headlines. The hundreds of millions spent on deferred maintenance, basic dormitory renovations, and classroom technology just don't. What is true is that housing and food costs are significant line items that keep growing, but this isn't about luxury. Construction costs have soared, building codes have become more complex, energy efficiency requirements add upfront expenses. Maintaining 50-year-old residence halls is expensive, whether they're luxury or basic. Athletics presents a similar story. Most athletic departments lose money and are subsidized by student fees and institutional funds. The question isn't whether colleges should have athletics, but whether students should subsidize them through tuition and fees. The reality is that spending patterns vary enormously between institutions. A small liberal arts college might spend heavily on student services, but not very much on athletics. A major research university pours money into laboratories and graduate programs. Community colleges operate on bare-bones budgets with few amenities at all. Blaming lazy rivers for the student debt crisis is satisfying, but it's also misleading. The structural forces that we've discussed, unlimited federal loans, state disinvestment, administrative growth, OPM partnerships, these matter far more than whether a college has a nice gym. Okay, so the federal government is finally creating consequences for programs that saddle students with unpayable debt. The new gainful employment rule, which takes full effect in 2026, could fundamentally change how career programs price their degrees. Here's how it works. If a program's graduates have debt payments exceeding 20% of their discretionary income, or if graduates earn less than the typical high school graduate, that program risks losing access to federal financial aid. No federal aid means no federal loans. No loans means programs either drop their prices or shut down. This rule primarily targets for-profit colleges and certificate programs, but it sends a clear message. The era of unlimited prices for degrees with minimal value is ending. Programs that charge $40,000 for certificates in fields that pay $25,000 will have to change or close. Now, we've already seen what happens when the worst actors in higher education face consequences. Corinthian Colleges, one of the largest for-profit chains, collapsed amid fraud allegations. The federal government has cancelled $5.8 billion in loans for students who attended these schools. Navient, one of the largest student loan services, has paid hundreds of millions in settlements for allegedly steering borrowers into expensive repayment plans and forbearances that maximized interest charges. These were not pricing problems, they were predatory practices that turned manageable debt into lifelong burdens. That's important to be precise here. Not every expensive program is a scam, not every for-profit college is predatory. But when you combine high prices, aggressive recruiting, weak outcomes, and complex loan products, you create conditions where abuse thrives. The gainful employment rule represents something new: automatic consequences for poor value. Programs can no longer charge whatever they want and assume federal loans are going to cover it. Policy levers can alter incentives. The changes are slow, but they're beginning. A new lawsuit filed in 2025 exposes another way elite colleges may be keeping prices high: early decision admissions and coordinated practices that prevent families from comparison shopping. Early decision forces students to commit to a college before seeing financial aid offers from other schools. You apply in November but get accepted in December and must withdraw all other applications. The college knows you can't compare their aid package to anyone else's. They have no incentive to offer competitive aid because you've already surrendered your leverage. So, what would you say to that? It's what the f***? The lawsuit alleges that this goes even deeper. It claims elite schools share information and coordinate practices in ways that suppress financial aid competition. Whether these allegations prove true or not, and right now they are just allegations, they do highlight something important. The most prestigious colleges have enormous market power. Think about it from the college's perspective. If you're Harvard or Stanford, you know admitted students will probably enroll regardless of aid. You don't need to compete on price. In fact, competing on price might signal weakness. So these schools can maintain high prices and modest aid packages, knowing their brand value overwhelms price considerations. For the 30 or 40 most elite institutions, normal market forces just don't really apply. They have more qualified applicants than they do spots. Their degrees carry prestige that translates into earnings. Their alumni networks provide value beyond education. When you have that kind of market power, you don't need to compete on price. And when schools don't compete on price, prices don't come down. But here's some crucial context. In recent years, sticker prices have actually stabilized or declined in inflation-adjusted terms across many sectors. Net prices at private nonprofits average around $16,500 for first-time students in 2024 to 2025. The runaway inflation narrative is increasingly outdated. Now, the solutions don't require billions in new spending. They require something a lot simpler, and it's called transparency. Let families actually see what they're buying, what it actually costs, and what it's worth. First, standardized financial aid offers. Every college would use the same format, clearly separating grants from loans, showing the real net price and including all costs. No more hiding loans in the award section, no more omitting living expenses, just clear, comparable numbers that families can actually understand. A novel concept, isn't it? Second, realistic cost of attendance calculations. Instead of colleges just inventing their own numbers, use regional living expense benchmarks based on actual data. If rent in your college town averages $800 a month, you can't claim students need $1,500. This would immediately reduce the ceiling for borrowing and force more honest pricing. Third, program-level return on investment data, publicly available and searchable. Not just university-wide averages, but specific outcomes for each major and each degree. What do English majors from this school learn? What percentage of MBA graduates are employed 6 months later? Real data that lets students evaluate whether a program is worth its price. Fourth, strict limits on revenue share recruiting. If online program managers want to partner with universities, cap their take at 25% of revenue and prohibit them from controlling recruitment. This would immediately pressure the most expensive online programs to reduce prices. And look, these are not radical ideas. The Government Accountability Office has recommended most of them. The Department of Education is already moving in this direction with gainful employment and financial value transparency rules. Several states have created their own college scorecard systems. Markets only work when buyers know what they're buying and what it costs. For decades, higher education has operated in artificial darkness. They's reforms, they'd just turn on the lights. Thank you for watching.